Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, you got some scope there. The breath freshener that of the young man on the go.
It's more than a breath freshener, Bob.
Is it a candy mint and a breath mint?
No,
is it a floor wax and a dessert topping?
It's a COVID fighter.
Oh, I thought that was Listerine. You don't have to actually do the gargling on camera, much less spit the stuff out. Mickey. What? I thought I caught something online about Listerine. Somebody recommending Listerine.
Presented in its most graphic form. The answer is, I'm pretty sure that the ingredient in Scope and Listerine kills the virus, sort of. But of course, it's no substitute for getting vaccinated. But it's one of the things that kills the virus. Apparently, Pepsid also kills the virus, bizarrely. Luckily, one of us is guzzling Pepsid. But Senator Johnson got in trouble for suggesting that constituents use mouthwash. But it does help a little. It just doesn't kill it in the nose, which is the problem. So since I'm now completely panicked about COVID again, I decided to gargle.
Well, last week you were assuring us that there had been no reported deaths from OMNIcron. And by the way,
I don't know if there have been now. Go ahead.
Well, there was a big pronunciation issue about OMNIcron last week, and I
got a lot of grief for that.
I was unfairly derided online. Here's what happened: I mistakenly said OMNIcron without realizing. I don't think it's Omna. I don't think there's an N there. I just said it. I just made a minor slip, as befits a man my age. And then you said, no, that's wrong. It's Omicron. And I thought we were arguing about whether it was or O. So I stood by my guns, and maybe I repeated Omicron again. I don't know. But what I meant was both Omicron and Omicron are acceptable, not to mention apparently Omicron in Britain. And according to the ancient Greeks, I think you don't even have to have the N at the end. Anyway, it was really an unfair. It was like a lynch mob online. And I'm still hurting. It's painful. These things are painful.
I got a very strange email from a mutual friend of ours that said, Mickey, I was touched that you let Bob off the hook for his OMNIcron mistake. And I said,
you have to tell us who this was. Tell us in the Parrot Room?
I'll tell you in the Parrot Room.
But, boy.
Anyway, it was very odd because I don't think I did let you off the hook. I gave you grief.
Okay,
but you did. I understand. I understand the misunderstanding now.
Yeah.
The answer is we're both senile. So okay.
So anyway, back to Omicron. Last week you were saying saying there had been no deaths. We should feel hopeful.
I'm not sure there have been. And then WHO put out a statement saying there had been no deaths. So that would turn out to be right. Have there been deaths by now? I just don't know. There was a tweet by a scientist saying, hey, at this stage in a pandemic, we should be seeing more deaths if it was virulent than not. And the evidence seems to be that it's milder than the Delta variant. The jury is still out just how much milder. And it does seem to affect unvaccinated people way more than vaccinated people. But the jury's out because it's mainly affected younger people who wouldn't normally be killed by the COVID anyway. And it's also in South Africa and Africa where there's a lot of natural immunity because the thing has already swept through the country. So they don't quite know what's going to happen. But things are looking up in terms of lethality of Omicron. Now, there are states like Michigan that are in fact experiencing surges, but I think that's in the old Delta virus, not in the new one.
Yeah, that all sounds right. I mean, I think the jury's still out. Death is a lagging indicator. You would think we would know more by next week when we tape, but I don't think we know very much. I mean, at least there are no big signs of alarm on the kind of lethality front.
There's alarm.
I mean, I saw a headline about how cases were up in South Africa that turned out to be not so alarming, because what they meant was it wasn't that, or cases were up among hospitalized people in South Africa, but it turned out that most of those were people who had come into the hospital for other reasons, and then they did the test as a matter of course, and it turned out they were positive, but they hadn't even been symptomatic. And in fact, total hospitalizations weren't up. So that seems like not alarming.
Right, but yes. Anyway, what I want to know is, if suppose, it is theoretically possible Omicron might not be this virus, but it's theoretically possible to have a virus that is very competitive, that outcompetes all the other viruses and is not lethal at all, in which case it would be a boon to humanity because it would be spreading immunity all around without killing anybody, okay? If Omicron isn't that, why can't we engineer that?
I thought about that.
Why can't we create the Holy Grail Savior Kwisatz-Haderach virus and release it onto the world?
Now, you would think, I was going to say maybe the science isn't advanced enough, but you would think if they have identified any genetic sequences in it that they know are responsible for pathological effects, right? That, like, I don't know, help it get embedded in your lungs or whatever, and they just change that one thing, that would be an improvement, right?
But you would think they would do this with every virus, though. Right?
Well, we rarely have a virus with stakes this high. I mean, there hasn't been this kind of focus. In fact, I continue to be amazed by how much we don't know. Like, for example, there initially we heard, well, they'll have a vaccine for this in a few months. And then last week's news was actually there's reason to think that even though they can tailor make the vaccine to the new variant, it may be a property of immune responses that they have a natural tendency to default to fight the variant that was the original source of immune protection. Like, so they just kind of go back to fighting the last war, so to speak. And I know they meant that to apply to vaccines, people whose immune protection was due to vaccines, and maybe people who had natural immunity through infection. But anyway, there's suddenly doubt on that front.
I don't understand. You have a vaccine to the new virus. Why wouldn't it fight the new virus?
Apparently, as I understand it, like if my system, now that it's been vaccinated to fight whatever it was, alpha or beta, or whatever, let's call it alpha, even though I don't think it was that. I think there was variant before that the vaccine was tailor-made to. But let's call it alpha. Let's say that my Pfizer is geared to alpha. As I understand it, the idea is that if the immune system sees anything very close to alpha, it just sends out the exact antibodies that fit alpha, like
that sort
lock
of makes
and key.
Sense because that sort of makes sense because the immune system isn't going to identify every part of a new virus before it responds. It sees a little part that it recognizes and it springs into action. So
right.
Yeah,
but you would also think that you would think in the long run there would also be a mechanism to eventually understand what's going on and refine the immune system for next time around or something. But who knows?
But was this idea of engineering the perfect virus, is that gain of function research? I think it sort of is.
Oh, I think it would be. Because I think the question of whether it's, loss of function or gain of function is semantic, probably. Yeah. If you're replacing a sequence, I assume it is. But I wonder the exact same thing, and maybe someday. But
someday we'll all be doing it in our backyards.
Meanwhile, this week's Brett Weinstein tweet on COVID, he's talking about, I don't know if he's talking about a specific vaccine mandate, like maybe the one in New York City that just came down, or he's talking about Biden's, the one that's being contested in the courts, the Biden initiative. But he tweets, "Not for this disease, not with these vaccines, not by these authorities. The orders are immoral, and our obligation to reject them is crystal clear. Worked out and codified explicitly at Nuremberg, it is time for us, all of us, vaccinated or not, to stand up which is a hashtag, against the mandates. I thought Nuremberg was, maybe a little over the top. I mean, it's not the same as Auschwitz, I guess. And I guess Nuremberg did entail, I assume, bans on involuntary medical experimentation or something on people.
You beats me. My interpretation of that is that the anti-vax mandate movement is gaining steam. The Senate has now voted against it, which is
against Biden's
vaccine mandate, and so
it was Manchin and John Tester, right?
So
who defected.
Brett has to be more radical than that because he's Brett Weinstein, so he has to go all the way to Nuremberg. But he has the factors right. I mean, if this disease were incredibly lethal like smallpox and the vaccine were totally effective, of course you would mandate it. But if as the disease gets less lethal and as the vaccine falls short, time again in many respects, it becomes more problematic to mandate it. And the other problem, of course, is that companies are discovering they're losing their workforce because the workers aren't buying it. So at some point, the workers win. And especially with the latest inflation results, which color everything at the moment, people don't want to lose even more workers and have to.
But we also had literally the best jobless numbers in 50 years this week.
Well, those two aren't contradictory; they're complementary.
No, they're not contradictory at all. But I thought you were saying people are staying away from work in droves. Well, there don't seem to be a lot of unemployed people.
But I'm saying if UPS loses half of its workers, it will have to pay. It'll cause a supply bottleneck, which will drive up prices, and it will be forced to pay more to lure them back. So
that's.
I've
said all along this disease is a close call in terms of what it warrants, because it's not that lethal. But that said, there is the other side of the inflation argument, which is that what will bring inflation under control is getting COVID under control. You can definitely make that argument, and that's, I think, part of the impetus behind Biden's vaccine mandate. So
right, but now
it's a tough one.
With the 6.8% inflation, that's was that over that must be year to year, right? That must not.
It's year to year.
Yeah. So it's not 6.8% in 1 month. So that has to be job one for him at the moment, is fighting inflation, not certainly not getting the economy back.
Right,
the economy is back.
But my point is there's two arguments about how you fight inflation. One is you got to get COVID under control. That motivates the vaccine mandate. You're saying one way to get it under control is drop the vaccine mandates so that workers won't rebel against them, right? That's what you're saying?
Right. And I guess I'm thinking also the hope of getting the COVID under control is fading as more and more variants are discovered. After Omicron, it's going to be something else. They've already discovered Omicron Light, which evades the PCR test. So I don't think it's especially lethal, but it evades the PCR test. And what if Omicron, turns out to be non-lethal or relatively non-lethal, but then it mutates and becomes more lethal while retaining its ability to spread? Then we're in the soup again, right? So I wouldn't, if I were Biden, I would not stake my presidency on controlling the virus anymore.
No, I mean, I agree that it's not looking good for the final death of all variants of this virus, like ever. I don't know. I mean, maybe the hope is that they become less and less lethal, or the therapeutics, the medications, the antiviral medications become decisive. I heard an alarming thing on that front, which is, the Pfizer one is apparently very effective. There's a Merck one that I thought was generically the same kind of drug, and both, the good news is both would apparently work against Omicron. But I heard that there's concern. I heard this about Merck, and I hope it doesn't apply to Pfizer, but that there's concern that it would actually foster new variants somehow in some way I don't understand. That one thing that I think kind of has to happen just psychologically is that those of us who are vaccinated have to put some faith in the idea that, there's a real chance of getting sick if you go out in the real world. But, what the vaccines have done for our T cells mean, and I guess to some extent for the antibody production, mean it's just not a highly lethal disease the way it was. You're just much less likely to get hospitalized or die than you were before you got vaccinated. Bring it on. Don't bring it on. Never mind. I
always believe in generalizing from my own personal feelings. I was feeling pretty invulnerable before, due to the vaccine before Omicron hit. And the question is, why do I feel vulnerable now? I mean, I'm in a highly vulnerable group, but and I won't tell you what group that is, Bob. But
wait. Now I'm curious. Is that Parrot Room?
No, it's just I'm older than 65. So
I didn't realize you. Are you? I didn't realize that. I didn't even know you were over 50.
Thank you, Bob. It's the lighting. It's really the lighting.
We invested a lot of money in the lighting.
I have a super lighting set behind me that I haven't installed. Anyway, and why is it that Omicron and Delta, I guess it was Delta, have scared me again? I don't quite know. I mean, I guess it's just because Delta isn't more lethal than what was there before, so I don't understand.
No, Delta especially shouldn't. And also the vaccines are pretty damn effective against Delta, especially with a booster. And supposedly Pfizer is saying that a booster, if you've got 3 shots, you're in pretty good shape against Omicron. At the same time, I understand why the Brett Weinsteins of the world, do their kind of conspiracy theories, because it does sound suspiciously convenient for Pfizer to say, we've looked into this. And if everyone will buy even more of our vaccines, it will all be okay.
Right. Anyway, I guess I want to wait until they have some killer treatments. I guess that's my argument before I get this thing. But I can get it again later. So why don't I go ahead and get it now? Then I can
totally just get it, relax and party. Final Pfizer-related comment. Pfizer chief executive Albert Bourla. I saw a picture of him wearing a face mask that said, "Science will win." I just really advise against that. I don't think he understands the nature of the psychology of the tribal tensions in a place like America. If he thinks that's like a good idea,
not a good idea. That's another bonus of Biden going soft on the vaccine mandate, which is it diffuses the tribal tensions. Right now, the Trumpers hate the mandate, and although there are a lot of left-wingers who hate the mandate too, as I think we discussed, especially around here, there's a whole bunch of liberals who hate the vaccine mandate, and they're cooperating with the Trumpers. So it's
these are probably leftists more than liberals, right?
Yeah, they're health nuts. Kind of people, don't want to eat fried food.
I see. Yeah,
they don't want to. They're not going to take vaccines.
The Greens.
And but anyway, it would diffuse. There would be an anti-tribal bonus if he relaxed the vaccine and relaxed the sort of the shrill science versus troglodytic Trumpers, divide. That would be good. Can I talk about? We have some other topics to talk about. We have the Build Back Better plan. We have Epstein. We have.
Okay, let's start with Build Back Better.
Ukraine.
We have what?
Ukraine.
Yeah. Let's go down that list. Now, I want to. The only reason I'm willing to do BBB early. Normally, I try to push boring stuff to the end, but there is this interesting Elon Musk angle, which is that Elon Musk has come out against Build Back Better, right?
Well, he came out against
such bullshit.
He came out against subsidies, but a lot of the subsidies are in the bill that already passed, not in Build Back Better, I think.
Well, he said.
May be wrong. Maybe they're in Build Back Better.
He said, quote, better, honestly, if the bill doesn't pass. Now, he does base that on what he says is opposition to all subsidies. But remember, Tesla has already exhausted its subsidies, right? Because the way those subsidies work is each manufacturer of electric vehicles gets a subsidy on the first 200,000 sold. So he got his and he enjoyed them. Well, but now he's done and he's against them.
Well, and now he has competitors who want them. And
right.
He'd like to strangle those competitors.
I mean, what transparent bullshit? You know, who does he think we are, Mickey? Who does he think we are?
I tweeted that right away, Bob. You didn't fool me.
Oh, did you? Well, God bless you. God bless you. But
there are all sorts of competitors, Rivian and Lucid, and I don't quite. I saw a sheet from a pro-subsidy group that convinced me that there are some useful things subsidies can do. For example, building out in rural areas, and So I'm not completely against electric car subsidies, but I think basically, you look around here, it's happening. The government can't stop it, and helping them will probably waste money and might risk, fucking things up if the government picks the wrong standard or builds things that don't work, or institutes a lot of requirements. If you want to build a charging station, you have to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, there are charging stations at the mall down the street. Okay, that's because their customers demand it. There are so many.
How long does it take? How long does it take to get charged?
I don't know. I think
for me, that's one of the killers.
Right. The different cars have, some of them have a fast charge function where you can do half or 80% in half an hour. That's, I assume, what we'd want. You can tweet in the meantime. Just surf the web. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, people are going to say this inflation number is a killer for the Build Back Better plan, which was already pretty implausible that it would pass by the end of the year anyway. And this is just going to allegedly strengthen Manchin's hand. And it's a legitimate worry. If inflation is our number one worry, why inject all this money into the economy? It's not completely paid for, apparently, in the first years. So why inject?
Well, that's the problem.
Why inject the money now?
That's the problem. Is that the inflationary effect is front loaded. The revenue comes in the back years.
Right.
It gets back to my chronic complaint that politicians are afraid to actually go out and get revenue the way you should by taxing people, especially rich ones.
But
Manchin, yeah, go ahead.
The other thing is a lot of the things in it are crap. The child care plan, we've been through this.
Are you not in favor of the child tax credit?
No, I'm talking about the child care plan, the daycare plan.
Oh, okay.
Which
you're not,
Matt Brunig has shown would increase costs on the middle class for 3 years, and the pre-K plan is sort of a fraud. And
what do you say?
Et cetera. So why have inflation if this is the pile of crap we're getting? The child tax credit at least sort of works as intended, sort of almost. Go ahead.
Oh, that's the sunniest I've ever heard you about it. But what do you say to the people?
It's just a social disaster.
What are the people you say to people who say, well, Mickey, if you want workfare, if you want to, in your ideal world, you would deny, for example, the child tax credit to people who aren't working. You would deny various things to people who aren't working. Don't you at least have to provide them child care? Make it easy for them to do that?
I'm for child care. I'm not against child care.
What is it you're against?
I'm against a plan. I'm against a plan that's so ill drawn that it doubles the cost of childcare. The problem isn't that they're paying money for childcare. So you're in favor
of people taking care of their children. No. You're coming out firmly in favor of that.
No, the problem with this is that, Bob, they're trying to do two things at once. They're trying to subsidize childcare so people can afford it, and they're trying to double the pay of childcare workers. These two are in conflict because doubling the pay of childcare workers makes childcare less affordable. If they just picked the one and said we're going to subsidize childcare, I'd be all for it. But they don't. They're trying to do these two contradictory things at the same time, and they don't quite have it right. Okay. So
you're against half of it. Now, by the way, I realize
you could once you've provided enough childcare, then you can start raising the wages, but don't try to do it all at once. Do both halves.
Okay, midweek I had an epiphany. What's the French term for the thing you finally realized you should have said at the time? It means top of the staircase or something.
Esprit d'escalier.
Precisely. And you pronounce that well, by the way. you were complaining last time about how inflationary BBB is, and I just realized, like, your whole ideology is inflationary. I mean, your two big Trumpist things are raise tariffs, clearly inflationary. Trump's tariffs, no doubt, were inflationary, and restrict immigration, which is also inflationary. Or to look at it another way, it takes a kind of anti-inflationary tool out of your toolkit because you can't import the low-wage labor. I'm not saying either policy doesn't have other justifications. I'm not going to argue about the policies. I'm just going to point out your ideology is deeply inflationary in impact.
It's inflationary, but then I want to neuter unionism, so that works in the other direction.
Speaking of which, Starbucks, baby. Starbucks. You heard about the Starbucks, the first ever Starbucks voted to unionize in Buffalo, New York.
Don't you get like it? Just going to Starbucks, doesn't it seem like a dying brand?
Since the pandemic,
do you want to go to Starbucks anymore?
I haven't been in much. I used to go in mainly when I was in the city, and since the pandemic, I haven't been there much.
Yeah.
God, I don't know if I've been to a Starbucks, honestly.
Well, there you go. You're the harbinger of doom. I have one more point about the BBB, which is the child tax credit, which I oppose, but a lot of people support, is expiring at the end of the year. If the big BBB bill does not pass, there is obviously going to be a move to extend the child tax credit so the checks don't stop. Pelosi says she won't do that as a way of forcing people to pass the big bill. Obviously, she's going to cave and they're going to try to pass just a bill extending the child tax credit at the last minute. The problem is it has to pass the filibuster, I think, unlike BBB, which is done through reconciliation. If you just have a bill saying we're extending the child tax credit, it's got to go through the Senate and get 60 votes. It might get 60 votes because the child tax credit is unfortunately quite popular. But that's an interesting wrinkle that we're facing as the end of the year draws to a close.
I thought that was in. Well, are you saying it is in BBB, but because BBB won't pass, they have to deal with it by the end of the year?
Yes. And my line is, if they let it expire, nobody would really notice except the politicians, and they should. There'll be stories in the press about, I really wish I had that $300 a month. But in terms of actual voter sentiment, it will be not very important, and that's the thing that the Democrats most fear, is that they'll kill it and nobody will notice.
Well, didn't you just say it's popular?
It's popular among the senators, yes.
Oh, but not among the people?
It's one of the least popular things among voters because the voters seem to see it as a temporary COVID thing. They don't understand why it's permanent. They support it during COVID when everybody was out of a job and you had to push money out the door and get some money to them, but they don't support making it permanent. The politicians support making it permanent.
Why? And why do they support it in spite of the fact that the people don't
because
care?
it seems like a benign thing. They've forgotten about welfare reform, and they see it. It's become one of these things like immigration reform, where everybody's for it and they have panels of 4 people and all 4 people are for it and they think it's a balanced panel. And it sort of has sort of libertarian aspects because it's like a guaranteed income. So no muss, no fuss. The government just sends out checks. It doesn't try any of this paternalistic workfare. And, it's pro-natalist and it's pro-family. So it can have mothers care for their kids at home. So conservatives like it. And nobody is forcefully making, except for AEI, half of AEI, American Enterprise Institute, that it's anti-work. Everybody's forgotten the concept of the culture of poverty, which was on everybody's lips in the 90s.
I would think that politicians may be calculating that whether or not it's at the front of the minds of voters, when an election comes around, if your opponent can say, you are the reason they're not getting their child tax credit, or I am the reason they are, that's not nothing, because enough people are benefiting from it.
Two things. One is Republicans are going to make an issue of the work, have given off occasional hints that they will make an issue of that we were paying people not to work. And the second thing is people in the middle class get these checks and they don't. I'm not sure they know why they're getting it. They don't think they deserve it. They don't. They're public spirited enough that they say, "Why am I getting this $300?" And the poor people who are getting the $300, there just aren't enough of them to swing the election. They're all Democratic anyway.
What was next on our agenda?
Epstein.
Okay. Yeah, the Ghislaine trial continues. There were pictures. Pictures were released of Ghislaine and Epstein.
Yeah. The everybody thinks that the prosecution is doing very badly and that Ghislaine might be acquitted. And the prosecution does seem to be doing very badly. And they haven't called Virginia Roberts, who is one of the main victims. They have 4 victims. Your girl Farmer is coming up, or she may have testified today. She's the 4th. But there were some problems. One of them was above the legal age in London, where she supposedly had sex with Epstein. Others had various sort of problems on cross-examination. They started the trial by interviewing the pilot, who testified he never saw anybody having sex or any underage girls on the plane. That wasn't a good first step for the prosecution. And if they have young prosecutors or inexperienced against a team of seasoned lawyers. And why would you do that if you wanted to win the case? This should be a slam dunk case. There's voluminous evidence that Maxwell was helping Epstein procure these women. And why would they lose it? Answer: they don't care about it, or they're intentionally blowing it. Specifically, they want to keep
new conspiracy theory. I like
new
this.
Conspiracy theory. They want to keep the big names out of the case. So that is the ominous aspect of Virginia Roberts not testifying. She's the victim who says she has sex with big name A, big name B, big name C. I forget exactly who the big names are, but one of them is, I believe, Dershowitz. Don't sue me if I'm wrong.
Is she the one in the picture with Prince Andrew?
Yes. And the other one is...
And she's underage at that point, right?
I don't know about that point, but she says she had sex when she was underage. And the other one is George Mitchell, who fits the number, one of the basic underlying conspiracy theories, which is, I heard an interview Vicky Ward gave, and one of the theories is Robert Maxwell.
Vicky Ward is the Vanity Fair reporter who first covered all this.
Right, she's one of the first people, and she. One of the theories is that Maxwell introduced Epstein to the Mossad at a time when Israel was very worried that the incoming Clinton administration would continue to pursue Jimmy Carter's policies, which they regarded as too hostile to Israel. So, Epstein then goes and compromises Bill Clinton and George Mitchell, who later became Mideast peace envoy, and a bunch of people who actually could help Israel if he were to have blackmail power over them. So
wait, you said Epstein introduced Ghislaine
that's why Mitchell
to the
is
Mossad?
Important. That's why Mitchell is important. What?
Did you say Epstein introduced Ghislaine to the Mossad?
No, Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, introduced Epstein to the Mossad.
Okay.
That was, and she made a bunch of other points, which I wrote down somewhere. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long-standing, thing, Mossad involvement. I mean, a long-standing speculation.
Right, and she says it's very speculative. There's a CIA agent who testifies to this, and he was a CIA agent, but nobody knows quite whether to believe him.
Because, her father, Robert Maxwell, I think pretty clearly was a Mossad asset or something, right? And possibly an asset of other national spy agencies, and his death was pretty damn mysterious.
And he's buried in Israel, but they seem to think he had a falling out with the Mossad, and he did die, as you put it, mysteriously.
And who delivered the Kaddish, is it, at his funeral? Is that the term, Kaddish? How do you pronounce it? No.
Then I don't know who.
I believe it's Tony Blinken's biological father.
Oh, okay.
I mean, let's go all the way with the conspiracy theory, man. Let's.
But you wouldn't think that they could keep a name out of a case like this, and they sort of promised that they would drop a couple of big names, and if they do drop no big names, even if they win the case, there's going to be an outcry that they're covering this up. I was impressed with the prosecution of Scooter Libby. The prosecution managed to prevent a key fact from coming out, which I thought was a key fact, which is that Libby had accused Chris Matthews of being anti-Semitic. If you remember, Libby called up Tim Russert and said, "I have some bad things about one of your people at your network," but they never said what it was. Well, it obviously was that he was accusing Chris Matthews of being anti-Semitic. And I guess
how do we know that?
It was impressive. Because I know people who are better reporters than I am.
Oh, okay.
That's why.
I do too, by the way, but I didn't learn anything like that from you. But go ahead.
Anyway, but they kept it out. So I was amazed they kept it out. So prosecution can arrange their case to keep things out. What I want to know is if there is an outcry, certainly if they lose the case, will they want the head of this new U.S. attorney? I mean, how big a fuck up can you? What could be a bigger fuck up than blowing the Maxwell case?
Is this Southern District of New York?
Southern District. It's a new U.S. attorney, a guy named, I believe, Damian Williams.
And it's the kind of glamour position among U.S. attorneys, right? That
right.
district.
He succeeded a very well-respected woman who was the interim after Trump had, fired the earlier.
And
US
is she
attorney.
the one who was responsible for this case happening at all, and then she left?
Well, anybody would have brought the case, but she had a good reputation. That's all.
But did she bring the case? I mean, is the reason that Ghislaine, she indicted Ghislaine Maxwell?
Yeah. But this guy, this new guy is a Merrick Garland clerk and a John Paul Stevens clerk. So you can't get better liberal credentials than that.
I don't know about Merrick Garland, man. I mean, I think it's, first of all, kind of idiotic to now bring a federal case against the guys who are already convicted of murder of Arbery. And the federal case now will be that it was a race-motivated crime. It was a hate crime. It's like, who wants to open that can of worms in the current political environment? They're going to jail forever, okay? What do you want to do, make it forever? Of course it's insane. He's a super weird guy. He's a weird guy.
If you say so.
I could go on. I've already complained a little. Maybe I will
I'm
more in the Parrot Room.
I'm told he's a very pleasant guest at dinner parties.
Well, you're plugged into those kinds of circles. But, you'd know. I wouldn't. Not the likes of me.
Let me. It's interesting. He's proving that maybe it wasn't so terrible that Mitch McConnell kept him off the Supreme Court. I mean, it was, from my view, in terms of who wound up there instead, but I certainly don't think he was a great choice. Other things Vicky Ward said. First,
the Vanity Fair reporter, whose story, by the way, just a little background, when she brought, this was before any of this had broken, she had a profile of Epstein that had some kind of unflattering stuff in it, and she delivered it to Vanity Fair, and I guess Epstein heard that it was in the works, lobbied Graydon Carter against it, and apparently at one point he came out of his front door, and there was a bullet on the porch. In any event, after that, they kind of spiked key parts of the story, right?
Well, she had the testimony of the farmers. She had victims.
Okay, and Graydon Carter cut all that out.
And they cut all the sex stuff out at the last minute. She says it was already in galleys, and then it got cut out by Graydon Carter, who, after Epstein had personally visited the offices of Vanity Fair, he actually showed up in the Vanity Fair offices to talk to Graydon Carter. And Graydon Carter says, "Oh, well, we just didn't have it nailed down, and it's all very
there was this bullet on my porch." And,
it's like
stuff like that.
It's like the Scientology meeting with the IRS. What did Epstein tell Graydon Carter that got him to change the story? And Epstein was very thuggish and threatening. I mean, he didn't hide. There's ample evidence
again.
Of that. So.
Again, apparently somebody left a bullet on on Graydon Carter's
Vicky Ward,
porch.
when he was trying to talk Vicky Ward out of it, he said, he kept saying, how is your newborn baby coming? And what hospital are you going to give birth at, and et cetera, et cetera. Right. So he's very scary. One of Ward's points is he didn't just get money from Leslie Wexner of The Limited. He was a crook, making a lot of money by fleecing Europeans, by having them safeguard assets in their names and then stopping returning their phone calls when they wanted to get their assets back. So there's
Epstein
that.
Was
Epstein, yeah. So he's and he was allegedly one of the masterminds behind the Hoffenberg Ponzi scheme, and he escaped scot-free, and Hoffenberg took the rap and went to jail. He seems to be. I've always thought he's just much more thuggish than we realize. I mean,
look, Wexner. I mean, there has been speculation about Wexner. He was in kind of the trucking business by virtue of being in the garment industry. Epstein's de facto predecessor. Okay, so Wexner is this guy. He did The Limited, Victoria's Secret. He has his estate in the Midwest, somewhere in Middle America, where I think it's in Ohio actually, where I think one of the farmer sisters, right? There's two farmers, right? And one of them felt that she was in effect being involuntarily confined and finally got out. And anyway, so Epstein had this position in Wexner's empire. As at one point he had power of attorney actually, and the predecessor of his, who was the guy who was most nearly his predecessor, or at least a guy who had the job before him, and I think right before him, a job that is more or less the same, was killed in a mob style hit the day before he was going to testify. I don't think he was going to testify necessarily about Wexner, but there's some weird shit going on involved.
What Vicky Ward points out is that all sorts of people are saying nasty things about Epstein now, but they didn't say it when he was alive. And why didn't they say it when he was alive? Maybe because they were worried that he would take reprisals against them.
Yep.
The other point she makes is that the story was dead until that Prince Andrew photo cropped up. That was the story that finally got the mainstream media interested in Epstein, because it was a big name that the British tabloids, wanted to write about, which I hadn't realized.
The Miami Herald thing is what put it on America's radar screen.
Right, but
Miami
before
Herald
that, it was what put it on sort of what got newspaper editors all over the world interested in it, and it eventually wound up in the Miami Herald helping it out, was the Andrew thing. The Miami Herald thing, they had a Trump angle. They loved it because it was an anti-Trump point. And there seemed a point at the trial where the prosecutors were making sort of gratuitous anti-Trump, mentions, like that they mentioned Mar-a-Lago and a visit to Mar-a-Lago. It doesn't seem to me it had all that much, all that important. But if you were a Democratic prosecutor who wanted to do your bidding for the party, you would make the trial as much about Trump and as little about George Mitchell and Bill Clinton as you possibly could. And they seem to be doing that.
Well, I mean, it is a prosecutor appointed by a Democratic president.
The fix is in. That's my new line.
Disappointing.
Prove me wrong.
I mean, it'll be disappointing if you would think they would have no trouble nailing Ghislaine. But and
then the whole thing is the whole thing was that they convict her and then they negotiate with her to have her turn over the list of names. But plus they have these alleged videos anyway in their possession. So it'll be a huge scandal. Anyway, go ahead.
I did hear a podcast with Benjamin Weiser, our friend at the New York Times, who looked deeply apparently into the Epstein death. He seems pretty convinced that it wasn't a suicide, for what that's worth.
Not.
I mean that it was. I'm sorry, that it was a suicide, and the a couple of things, like at some point before when he was in jail, he was like all chipper, and they did the suicide evaluation, and he said, "No, I love life. Who would want to be dead?" Blah blah blah. But then apparently two things happened. One is he found out he wasn't gonna get out on bail. He was gonna have to stay in prison. I think that was it. And then the second thing is, and this was like almost day of or day before the suicide, there was a big document dump that that brought out a lot of the details in a way that made him look a lot obviously worse. Those two things happened in fairly rapid succession, and then he died.
That would convince you to commit suicide? Does he deal with the neck wound? Does he deal with the fact that the prison was run by a Dominican gang? Does he confront those things?
He didn't get into that. You should call him. He didn't get into that.
He's obviously not a listener of this podcast.
Could be. But,
Anyway, I'll take a look. This is an article he wrote or a podcast?
I was listening to the podcast on the daily this past week.
Oh, okay. But did it have the breathless guy? Is he still on it?
I believe this was one hosted
Michael
by the
Barbaro.
breathless guy. So you're saying Jeffrey Epstein died in prison? That's exactly right, Michael. So usually they have written a piece or are writing a piece when they're on that podcast. So it's probably a piece by him.
My other big trials, briefly, Jussie Smollett, is that how you pronounce his name? My only line is I don't think he should go to jail. He should be convicted, humiliated, but he should not go to jail.
Slate pitch by Mickey.
Jail's for murderers. This guy didn't murder
come
anybody.
On. No, look, first of all, lying to the police, filing a false police report is a big deal.
He should be
is a big
He should pay a huge fine and be on probation
not
for
only that,
20
not
years.
only that, but he was like, exploiting, kind of parasitic upon the whole movement that is motivated by what they see as genuine concerns about, racially motivated violence. And and the funny thing is that some people in that movement have kind of stood up for him, but he was exploiting that movement. No, he should do jail time. Lying? No, it's like you can't let people get away.
People don't
with
do jail time
manufacturing
for fucking smashing your window and stealing your computer.
Well, they should do jail time too. They should be in his cell. They should put them all in one cell.
And introduce him to
he, by the way, is the guy who faked the hate crime against him in Chicago.
Okay, well, see, I'm a bleeding heart liberal, but it does seem to me that this is pretty damn humiliating for him and all the people who supported him. And I'm happy to declare victory. But
the deal can't be that if you're this high-profile person with a great career and it's ruined by your crime, you don't go to jail. But if you're a nobody, you go to jail. That doesn't make sense.
No, I don't think a nobody.
The reason he's suffering is because he's a famous actor, and you're saying famous actors shouldn't go to jail because they suffer enough.
People who do people who submit false reports of crime routinely go to jail? I doubt it. They're letting everybody out of prison. I doubt that people who routinely a nobody who falsely reported that their husband beat them or something, that person's not going to go to jail.
I don't know. I think there is also a question of like how much of society's resources are you using with a false report? How much of the government
you should build them? Bill this guy. Make him work his ass off to
but also
pay back the city of Chicago.
Immaterial resources. Never mind. I'll
You're a hard man.
I'll reflect on this. I am a hard man.
I have other topics. There's supposedly the Iran negotiations are going better because
a little hint of that over the last 48 hours.
In part because the Russians intervened and told Iran to get off the dime. And you have to wonder if that's somehow tied in with the Ukraine negotiations and Biden's allegedly soft response to Russia, which doesn't seem that out of line to me. But this all has to be part of one big negotiation, right?
Well, I don't know how much leverage Russia has with Iran. I don't think as much as they would have with Syria.
Supposedly both they and the EU ganged up on them and said, your last demands were too strident. You need to soften your tone, and they did.
Well, the EU, Russia has leverage by virtue of being one of the parties to the deal. There, the U.S. is the party to the deal that's no longer a party to the deal. The EU has leverage by virtue of saying that it, how it will handle sanctions going forward and so on. if that's what you mean, maybe Russia has some influence, and they may have some other
Just
influence.
the stories I read,
know.
the stories I read, and maybe in the New York Times, suggested that they had some influence, and that things are looking better. And
yeah, who knows? I mean, also, there have been these reports about Israel asking the U.S. to stage a military strike against Iranian forces in Yemen or something, and also about Israel trying to arrange for the U.S. to supply air refueling capabilities in the event that Israel attacks Iran, depending on the outcome of the talks. Of course, for Israel, if the talks are successful, that's bad news. I mean, they consider bad news. And if they're unsuccessful, they can claim it's bad news, I guess. On the other hand, all of these kinds of reports, Israel planning attack,
it's all saber-rattling, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, they are sometimes tactical leaks. Even if people like Jeffrey Goldberg sometimes choose to believe them and put them on the front page of the Atlantic.
Did you see that Trump has turned against Netanyahu? And says he came to realize that Netanyahu wasn't serious about making peace with the Palestinians.
Wait.
Feels used about him on the Iran front also.
But did he say that recently? There's something he said a while ago that came to light about Netanyahu, right? It was after Netanyahu sent some kind of greeting to Biden after Biden's election. That pissed Trump off, and that fact just got reported this week, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Something Trump said about that.
The question is, will Trump disown his son-in-law, who was pushing had Netanyahu as a house guest when he was 13 or something, and was undoubtedly pushing a pro-Netanyahu line in the Trump administration.
Well, I think there's no doubt that, Netanyahu and Trump's son-in-law and people like Sheldon Adelson have a certain amount to do with Trump withdrawing from the deal. Right. There are now a lot of Israeli officials being quoted as saying they wish that America hadn't gotten out of the deal, but now they tell us.
Did you read Walter Russell Mead's piece calling for a strong defense of the Ukraine?
No, but I could have predicted it. You should have asked me that as a test, and I would have passed.
It made one point that I hadn't realized. I mean, I tend to focus on the origin of the current Ukraine regime, which was, Putin has a point when he said it was a coup. The new regime was not a successor regime within the old constitution. They ripped up the old constitution and installed this new guy in what was essentially a coup. So we shouldn't go around saying we're promoting democracy. But what Mead points out is that since then, the pro-Western forces have basically been winning in Ukraine. That Ukraine has become popularly much more pro-Western, and Moscow is losing. And the reason they need to have a war now is because it's their last chance. And that was an interesting point that I hadn't realized. That the people may not have been for the Western regime back then, but now they are.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that sentiment has been moving somewhat away from Putin, but I never know who they're talking to, because I think sentiment is somewhat divided between East and West to begin with, right? And I assume that a lot of Western news sources are from Western Ukraine, so I don't know exactly what all that means. And of course, it isn't just that Putin has that ouster of the pro-Russian president as a grievance, although I think it's understandable that he does, given the clear evidence of some kind of American role in that. But, he wants to stop certain things from happening. He does not want Ukraine to become part of NATO. And in that sense, if there is more and more sentiment, pro-Western sentiment, he's getting more and more alarmed, I guess, that might happen. There's also the fact that we have been sending weapons to Ukraine to fight the rebels in eastern Ukraine, who more or less have possession of eastern Ukraine.
Meade says he wants it for more than that. He wants it to dominate the region, especially the Black Sea, I guess, and sort of be a more intimidating military presence. So he wants to do that. I guess he would want all of Ukraine. And, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. And, if you read Eugene Onegin, I'm probably mispronouncing it, by, excuse me.
Yeah, well, Ukraine isn't just part of the Soviet Union.
The events in Eugene Onegin happened in Ukraine, okay? It's all Russian, okay?
The events of what? What is it we're talking about?
There are events in Eugene Onegin that happened. Which is what? Which is the great epic poem of the great Russian poet who was an eighth black and whose name I'm forgetting because I'm senile.
He was an octoroon?
Yes. It's the most famous Russian poet. Who is the most famous Russian poet? Pushkin.
Oh, Pushkin. Was he? Yeah. He was 1/8 black.
Yeah.
Who knew?
His grandfather was an Ethiopian general who was given to the Tsar as a sort of gift, and became a Russian general. Anyway, so
is it a poem about like medieval times? Because supposedly Ukraine was the cradle of Russian civilization back then.
It's a poem about the time in which Pushkin lived, that he goes. He goes back to his farm, and his farm's in the Ukraine. Okay, it's like
Okay, but there's also the fact that supposedly Ukraine is considered by some the cradle of Russian civilization, going back to medieval times.
Okay. Anyway, and there's always been a pro-Ukrainian separatist movement too. I mean, I was wandering around Russia. I was wandering around Washington D.C. a couple of months ago, and there's this giant statue in the middle of the P Street area there near Georgetown, and I've always wondered what it was, and it's a statue for Ukrainian independence that some Ukrainians had managed to get the government to put up there. So it's not like this is a new issue.
Just quickly, I mean, remember, after the Cold War, there were people who, well, first of all, the people who thought we should dissolve NATO, but certainly there were a lot of people, including even Tom Friedman, who thought we should not expand NATO eastward. Clinton started that by first just like, Poland, whatever. Right. But those are Warsaw Pact nations that had been part of the Soviet alliance. Then gradually we started eating into the former Soviet Union. The Baltic states had been part of the Soviet Union. And now to go for Ukraine, I mean, that's as close as you can come. And look, Mickey,
I'm not for that.
Great, strong. Yeah, well, good. Neither am I. You got to understand, it was totally unnecessary. I think it's been completely counterproductive. And some people say, well, man, it's a good thing we did expand NATO. Look at how aggressive Putin is. His aggression is always in response to the expansion of NATO.
This gets to a point that I wanted to raise, and it's a point, I'll get to the point. It's a point raised by what's happened to the Confederate, the statue of Robert E. Lee in Charlottesville, which is they're melting it down, and they're not just melting it down. They said they'd put it in a museum. Instead, they're melting it down, and they're turning it into a statue for racial justice and against white supremacy, okay? So they're really rubbing the noses of this pro-statue people in it. And I wonder, is rubbing the noses of the losers always a mistake? In other words, that's what we did to Russia. We won the Cold War, and we rubbed their noses in it by letting all these countries into NATO and saying, ha, you lost, now we're going to turn the screws on you. And that produced this counterproductive reaction on Putin's part. And I'm thinking in the South, this is going to produce a counterproductive reaction. If you want these pro-statue people to melt away into the background, don't melt down the statue and turn it into an anti-white supremacy statue. Just take down the statue. Go hide it somewhere. Bury it in the ground. Do something. And the other examples that I don't know about would be after World War II. Did we rub Germany and Japan's noses in it? Japan, we certainly didn't.
No,
but
we didn't.
Germany, I don't think we did.
Lesson. No, we didn't. We had learned our lesson from World War I. In World War I, we did, and that was widely thought to have contributed to World War II. And so we didn't do it. We did the opposite. The Marshall Plan helped Germany. We didn't impose reparations on them and that kind of shit. We did the opposite, and it worked.
I guess the only reason I'm hesitating was there was some evidence that I read that German soldiers after World War, in the immediate aftermath of World War II, were put in camps where they were basically starved to death. A lot of them,
I wasn't aware of that,
and it was a lot harsher than we learn today. It didn't last for long, and you're right.
But I would say if that happened, it was probably in effect, a military policy, occupying whoever was running the occupation did it or something, as opposed to it being, the post-war strategy agreed upon by the Allies, which is, so it wasn't the equivalent of the Versailles Treaty and all of that,
And the other great example is Reconstruction, which gets back to Charlottesville. I mean, Lincoln wanted to treat the South relatively benignly. He was killed.
Right.
And hardliners took over, and the result was a Reconstruction that pissed off so much of the South that they, as soon as they were able to, they reinstalled Jim Crow, and things went back in the other direction. So has rubbing people's noses in it ever been a wise policy?
Right. No, I am for magnanimity and victory, as you know from all the times I've defeated you and not gloated.
Well, I was thinking, that your OMNIcron mistake. I mean, I was relatively benign. I could have rubbed your nose in it, and in fact, I was so benign that my friend sent me an email saying he was touched at how benign I was.
Who is this asshole? Disclose his name.
Ari Posner.
Don't wait for the paywall. It was Ari Posner?
Correct.
Should have saved that for the paywall. So Ari listens to us?
He listened to it the other day. It's Ari's a great guy. We're having lunch, but
he is very funny.
Yes. Maybe it was all a joke that I didn't. I mean, obviously he was joking, but he wasn't actually moved.
Did he write the Culture of Plagiarism piece for the
I forget.
New Republic, the one with Casper, the ghost on the
I think so,
cover,
yes.
to signify ghostwriting.
Never
know. We should. Hey, it's been like, has it been an hour? Probably close. I don't know. Where's my timer? Where's my I don't know.
It's been an hour and 2 minutes, Bob.
Oh, it's about time. There is other foreign policy stuff I wanted to talk about, but
go ahead.
Got
to give them the impression we're giving them something extra, Bob. Like Wayne Newton in Las Vegas. They're telling us to stop, but no, we're having such a good time that we're going to keep it going. I can tell you're buying into this.
What's a Wayne Newton song I could sing? What were his songs?
Yeah, there's only one that everybody remembers.
Donka Shane.
Correct.
Baby Donka Shane. Hey.
Okay.
Stop now?
Stop now. Well, what was the foreign policy you wanted to talk about it?
Oh, there's so much. I don't know. But it's not like you want to promise it as Parrot Room content, because I don't think it's a proven winner in terms of fundraising. Foreign policy. Nobody gives a shit about foreign policy.
So talk about it.
So we should talk about it here and tell them to escape it.
Yeah.
They have to enter the
There you
Parrot
go.
Room. Like, if you want to hear shit that you don't care about, stay here. If you don't, go to patreon.com/Parrot Room, put down El Dinero, and you will gain accesso to the Parrot Room.
Bob, you just canceled yourself.
Yo hablo español.
All right. So talk about your foreign policy thing already.
Which one? First of all, on the kind of not accommodating the reality of other reasonably powerful nations. I mean, Russia, again, it's not like a rising power, but it's got nuclear weapons. If it wants some degree of control over its region, that's hardly unprecedented in great power politics. But China is an absolutely rising power, and all rising powers throughout history have expanded their military footprint. Anyway, there was this big alarmist piece in the Wall Street Journal this week about the fact that reportedly China is hoping to establish a military base in Equatorial Guinea, which is in Africa. And the way the Wall Street Journal reporter put it was that being able to refuel and refit ships, quote, opposite the east coast of the United States is setting off alarms in the Pentagon and blah, blah, blah. Well, First of all, it's opposite Brazil. Okay, if you look at where it is further away from Miami than China is from Seattle. It's like they're not getting closer. And, this reporter is trying to turn this into this major security.
Also, we have bases all over the world, so they have some bases all over the world. Of course.
And we didn't before. We were a great power, and then we did.
This is a problem I have with Mearsheimer. It seems to me if China were not a communist nation, they would be much less of a threat. It's not just that they're a great power. It's that they're a great communist power that does not want to be part of the ordinary world of democracies. I mean, they're different.
That we can argue whether that's a threat.
They're out to show that they're superior to us.
I'll tell you what.
And they're very threatened. And because they're basically a dictatorship that's precarious, they're very threatened in a way that if they were, Angela Merkel, the Chinese Angela Merkel running China, they would not be.
Whether that's a threat is something we can argue about in the Parrot Room. Okay. We disagree. I think basically you think of them as a rising power, and that's what they are.
Well, and so India, so India has to be a rising power too. I think your previous argument was that India doesn't have much of a military. Well, under the Mearsheimer theory, they will have a military because all rising powers have a military. So they will vastly expand their military and they will challenge China.
Well, they already have nuclear weapons.
Right, but they don't have a big navy. They will soon have a big navy.
No. Okay, but let's see. What else?
Fred Kaplan's piece on our military, which was, I thought, very good in Slate, that basically said the new defense budget that just passed is $25 billion more than even Biden asked for. So we're throwing money at the problem of sort of Chinese weapons, and that doesn't bother me that much. What bothers me is that, as Fred said, they haven't done any of the analysis as to what weapons we really need. They just thrown money at all of them. For example, we're building a new aircraft carrier where there's a whole debate over whether you want more big ships or do you want a Navy filled with a lot of small ships, or do you want to have a combination of both? They haven't had that debate. They're just throwing money at it. And Fred's best point was ICBMs, we're basically just replicating our ICBM force on land when there's a good argument that we should have fewer ICBMs on land where they're vulnerable. We don't need them anyway. And they're not having that argument. They're just throwing money at it. So I thought that was a good piece.
Fred is very good. And speaking of Fred's, by the way, Fred Hyatt died. You saw it, right?
Yeah, that was on my list. I was.
We could talk about that.
I was going to talk about that in the Parrot Room.
He was the op-ed. He was the editor of the opinion page.
I have no particular line on him except that he was a very, very nice man.
Yeah, we can. We can talk in the Parrot Room. We could talk about this trans swimmer for Penn who's destroying all records.
Oh, if you want. Okay. Are we doing our?
You're not into that issue?
Not that much. We can talk, but that's okay. It takes one to tango, Bob.
Takes one to tango in the Parrot Room. That's what we say in the Parrot Room.
We can talk about crime in Los Angeles. We can talk about the mountain lions coming down from the hills to patrol our neighborhoods.
I saw your tweet, man. That was like signs of the apocalypse level shit, man.
They want to eat.
You got mountain lions roaming the streets of affluent suburbs in Southern California.
Well, they're doing it. They want to eat our dogs. We can talk about Mr. Zemmour.
Feed them the cats. Feed them the cats.
We can talk about Mr. Zemmour in France. We can talk about Jeffrey Goldberg's plan to have the Atlantic for the foreseeable future be all about Trump, 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 and what fun that's going to be. We can talk about Boris Johnson's decline. We can talk about David Brooks's divorce from conservatism.
Oh, yeah. Somebody wanted us to talk about David Brooks. Somebody on Twitter. Right. I didn't know what they meant, but apparently you do.
We can talk about why Substack convinced me perversely not to go paid with my newsletter. We can gloat about BuzzFeed's stock decline if you want. We can talk about
Jesus, Mickey, we don't have all night, man. Wrap it up here.
We can talk a little bit about reader comments about our discussion of the Beatles, which seemed to be a little harsh and hostile.
Yeah, we
What
got to
can I
rein some of
say?
them in. No, we got to slap some of the commenters on the wrist. I think
They said
we got to show them who's boss. I have something else I want to say about the Beatles. A little micro moment thing about the Beatles documentary.
One guy who I actually know was a nice guy said the most annoying thing you can possibly say: do better.
Oh, I hate that.
Do better is even worse than what happened to you. Do better is the worst.
You're
kicker.
exactly right. That is the hierarchy of insults. You're right. Do better is the most annoying insult. It's worse than you're better than that, even.
It's do better. You're better than that. What happened to you? I think, or maybe.
And why is your apartment so small?
No, it's now we know why your apartment's so small.
Right.
Because we read Ben Smith's article and we know you're being punished for your Trumpism. So you're being forced to live in a small apartment.
Okay, so then I'm going to say a little more about, we're going to talk a little about the China thing, and I'm going to connect it to this ridiculous democracy summit that I hope is wrapping up even as we speak.
Oh, I was hoping you would address the democracy summit. Good.
Yeah, I'll do that in the Parrot Room. I could tell you about a weird experience I had. I was on the verge of actually buying a car, a perennial Parrot Room topic, and there's something mysterious happened that maybe you can explain to me by virtue of your deep understanding of the way car dealerships work, but it was pretty strange.
I don't after my foray into the Beatles, I don't claim deep understanding of anything. But
do better. Do better.
Okay, you could see that. And we can also, if we really want to rile people up, we could talk about whether sabermetrics has destroyed baseball.
Well, it's made it longer. A lot of pitching changes.
Freddie DeBoer wrote a Substack post claiming baseball is now unwatchable.
Well, getting longer. Yeah, it seems like an easy fix. It seems like, anyway.
How could you ban sabermetrics? You people, you can't do statistics anymore?
Just limit how many pitching changes, or say, if you're going to bring in, every time you bring in a new pitcher, the next batter starts with a 1-0 count, or something. There's any number of things.
I like that every time you take out your starting pitcher, you lose the designated hitter. Whatever pitcher you bring in is going to have to hit.
Whatever. Waterboarding. They can do something. They can do something that will stop this. Okay. So that's another entertaining episode. I mean, can you imagine, folks, what it's like behind the paywall if the free one is this good? Unless you have a couple of old guys who get tired after an hour and can't produce it.
More displays.
But that's not the case.
More displays of senility. Didn't I cover pretty well for not even remembering Pushkin's name?
No, I think it was pretty evident.
I took a drink of coffee. I sort of diverted attention.
No, you spent so long doing that I started saying things to cover for you. I really did. Go back and look at the video.
Yeah, okay.
I was about to dial 911, and then you finally came up with it.
Okay, but you could have supplied the name. That would have helped, Bob. It
was on the tip of my tongue because honestly, I think that's the only Russian poet I could think of.
Well,
that's how ill-versed I am in the letters.
Okay.
All right. So we will see people at patreon.com/Parrot Room.
Okay.
Or next week at this place in time. And there's the parrot himself.
Go for the Parrot Room. Room.
Exactly. Yeah, excellent. We'll see him there.